Hello and welcome to this podcast thing that me and Tanner are doing.
Yes, me and him.
We got my brother, my recycled balls.
No. It's my recycled balls.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You should be
I'm
sorry.
actually not satisfied with this opening.
I know, because you've already screwed it up.
I know, I'm sorry. Today we're going to be talking about the movie Mobile Suit Gundam. Well, actually we're going to be covering all three movies, but
we're splitting them up into three parts just for the sake of convenience.
Yeah, it'll all be one recording, but we're going to take breaks in between.
Right.
So we'll start with the first movie, which is just titled Mobile Suit Gundam.
And it's and for record's sake, the Mobile Suit Gundam movies are mostly a condensation of the actual television series.
Yeah, they have they reuse a lot of the footage from the show.
And the first movie is episode 1 through what?
I think about 13.
13? Okay, yeah.
It rearranges a couple things, but for the most part, it's done incredibly well.
It took place it came out in 1979, right?
Well, the original series did.
Right.
I think the movie trilogy came out sometime in the 80s.
Okay.
After stuff like Star Wars had gotten popular.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
Let's just jump right into the movie. The characters first off. Let's start off with the characters. Well, before we actually get into the characters, even why don't we get in with the plot and we'll basically explain what's going on in these series of movies.
All right. So the premise of these movies is that it takes place in the midst of what's known as the 1-Year War in the universal century of 0079. At the beginning of 0079, a cluster of colonies called a Side 3, which was furthest from the Earth, on like the dark side of the moon, kind of, decided it wanted to declare itself independent from the Earth Federation, who was basically in charge of the Earth sphere. And the Federation was like, nah.
And the colonies were like, how about I do anyway?
And so it triggered a war, which
is a civil war, mind you, not
could be argued as being a revolutionary war.
We've already gotten into these semantics already.
I know.
won that debate.
You won that debate, and then I thought of other points. But that's not the point. The point is that there's a war going on between humans living in space and those living on Earth who are trying to control space.
And the two sides
of the conflict.
The two sides of this conflict are the United Earth Federation.
The Earth Federation.
Yes.
Forces.
And the Principality of Zeon.
Yes.
Who, despite their name as a principality, are actually a dictatorship.
They're kinda, yeah.
They're a dictatorship.
It's kind of a high-ruling family, the Zabis. We're kind of getting into some stuff that gets further developed in later movies. It's relevant for this movie. We're just kind of...
We're laying backstory. We're laying the lore down.
Yeah.
And right before we get into this, right before the start of this movie, the Zeons are kicking ass. They're winning this war.
Oh yes, in an attempt to swiftly conclude the war, they hijack a colony and try ramming it into Earth to try and destroy the Earth Federation's headquarters in Jaburo, South America. And it doesn't quite work out because the colony ends up breaking up on its descent. And
yes, the opening scene is the serene city of Sydney, Australia, and from the sky it blocks out the sun, and it just falls in the entire city. Millions dead in an instant.
Yeah.
And that's how the movie starts. So automatically...
Well, actually, the movie starts with an explosion inside of one of the colony cylinders, but the actual context for what's going on in that scene is never properly explained.
Right.
But, so the colony drop, that was the first big move from Zeon. And then after that, since that plan utterly failed, they decided to launch a full-scale invasion of Earth itself
Right.
by deploying mobile suits on Earth and just wrecking that shit.
Yeah, and the mobile suits, they're giant robots.
Giant robots.
Giant robots controlled by pilots.
Yes.
Think Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Or I don't know, Gundam Wing.
Or Gundam Wing. Right. Any Gundam series that you're familiar with.
I'm actually trying to think of some others. Big O.
Yep, Big O.
Escaflowne.
Right.
Maybe Giant Gorg. I haven't actually seen that one, so I could be wrong.
The Gurren Lagann.
Gurren Lagann. But yeah, a lot of Mazinger Z. A lot of these later shows took inspiration from Gundam. Obviously not Mazinger Z.
It should.
Mazinger Z came
and
out
a lot of other genres also took a lot of inspiration from Gundam. I think, what was it? A couple of them have.
Probably.
Like, I think Fish of the North Star took the inspiration for the whole wasteland.
I think they took that from Mad Max.
Okay. But there is a wasteland scene that's eerily reminiscent.
Yes, but that's at a later point.
That's at a later point. So now let's get into the characters who are some of the...
Well, before we finish that, we should probably finish what was going on with the mobile suits in the invasion of Earth. So, again, this is not actually presented in the movie. This is stuff that's happening before the movie. So, the Principality Zeon launches a full-scale invasion of Earth utilizing mobile suits, and they just wreck the Federation. But I mean, the Federation are pretty much powerless to stop the invasion force because there's so much because they don't have their own mobile suits. So the Zeon ends up spreading their front line so thin that they actually run into supply line problems.
As with, many wars historically, you've got the, World War I and World War II, the German army's forces are spread too thin, and they can't get supplies out to anybody in time, and, that's sort of with many wars in history. So it's historically accurate. If you spread yourself too thin, you can't go anywhere.
Right.
And the Federation can't strike back because their forces are just so destroyed and demolished.
Kind of disorganized. They don't have the kind of firepower to reliably fight back.
Yes. Right.
Like there are some later medias that show that there are attempts to fight back against the.
It's just
against the mobile suits, but since they don't have their own mobile suits, it's a fruitless effort and just Pyrrhic victory most of the time.
So the Federation don't have any mobile suits.
So they can't push back their aggressors, but their aggressors can't push forward. So it's kind of locked in a stalemate for several months.
That is until
Operation V.
Operation V, the start of the movie.
And the series proper.
Yes.
But what basically ends up happening is that the Federation starts developing their own mobile suits and starts constructing them on one of the colonies in Side 7. Now, the Zeon forces actually catch wind of this and assign one of their ace mobile suit pilots, Shar Aznable, to go and investigate the claims.
And we'll get into him in just a couple of minutes.
Oh yes, if anybody who's listening to this is aware of Shar Aznable, you know how great of a character he is.
He is amazing. He is, in my opinion, probably the second or third best character in that entire show and movies.
Would kind of agree. I would put him as probably being the best character for his overall story, but that's like also including a bunch of stuff from like side stuff and sequels and stuff.
And there's also in this war there's also a third side that is it. I can't remember which side it is.
Side 6.
Side 6.
Side 6 chooses to remain neutral, but they don't become relevant until much later.
Right. But
some of the other sides are also try to have neutrality or whatever, but they're not quite as important to the story.
But yes, Side 6, they show up later, and they're completely neutral. They're basically the Sweden of this story.
Yes, but we'll get into that later. So
So then,
Side 7, civilian colony, mobile suits being developed in secret, Zeon forces going in to investigate, and that's where the movie starts.
right.
And so now we can talk about the characters.
Right. So first character, the main character of the series, probably the most important character in the entire show, Amuro.
Amuro.
Yes.
A bit of a shut-in with some knowledge in mechanics.
His dad is one of the principal developers of this mobile suit Gundam.
Of these secret mobile suits.
Right.
Which include the Gundam that
Gundam,
just
yes.
revealed. Spoilers for
it's not
too much of a spoiler.
It's not
though.
a spoiler when it's the name of the title of the movie.
I know. But so yeah, Amuro.
So he's kind of a shut-in. He's kind of shy. He doesn't really talk to anybody. He has a bit of anxiety problems.
Probably.
Most likely.
He definitely is more of a shut-in
He's kind of
insular.
He's somebody who was brought up to by his own mother to
even though she wasn't around for a good chunk of his life after his father moved to space.
She wasn't around very often, but he was brought up to be pacifistic against this whole war.
Or at least that's what you would have hoped. But
yes.
We'll get into that in a little bit. Not nearly as later as Side
Yes.
6, but let's see. There's also Frau Bo, like one of his few friends in the colonies.
Right.
Who
And she's
almost acts like a surrogate mother to him at times, simply because who else is going to? His dad's always off doing whatever he's doing.
Yeah, she's kind of important to the story as well. But, I mean, for most of the series, she serves as not really even a main character, just sort of a side character that's there. But she has her moments, and she does sort of talk Amuro through some of these problems he has throughout the series.
We've also got other characters who are living in the side, such as Kai Shidan, who's a bit of a delinquent character.
Right, he's the punk of the group.
Yeah, he is definitely a punk. We've got Hayato Kobayashi, who is another friend of Amuro's,
Right.
and who kind of got his own stuff going on.
Right.
The show will explain that later, and I do want to touch on his stuff at much
Right.
later on in this video.
Okay, right.
Or recording or whatever this is going to be.
Yes, right.
We got Sayla Mass, who I think at this point had recently come to live in the side, or maybe she was just visiting or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to delve too deeply into her backstory because you haven't actually seen the Origin movies.
Right.
Which do delve quite a bit, so we'll leave it a bit vague. Just know that she actually has some importance.
Right, she's kind
eventually.
of relevant to the plot.
We've also got Mirai Yashima, who is the daughter of some company. I don't actually know what they do.
Oh, yes, right, her. Alright. She ends up being sort of the first mate, as it were.
Kind of pilot, but that's we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
A little ahead of ourselves, but she's nice to a fault.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, and these aren't all the major characters. These
No.
are just some of the ones that become relevant early on.
And then we have
People who are just living in the sides.
And then we have Char himself, who is.
We'll get to him.
We'll get to him. No, not now.
Not right now,
Ah, shucks.
because we haven't actually gotten to the initial conflict
Right.
of the
Okay.
movies.
I see. Yes.
Which is that because the Zeon forces under Char's command are investigating this colony to search for the Federation mobile suits. A couple Zaku mobile suits, which
are basically
friggin' iconic.
Yes, which are pretty much the Zeon infantry.
Yeah, they're like the most mass-produced of the
Right.
of the Zeon mobile suits.
They're the iconic mobile suit.
Oh yeah, and they're the first mobile suits that you actually see in the series.
Our Zaku's, yes.
They are.
But
So great.
yes, but as they're investigating, they come across.
They do find evidence of the
Yes.
mobile suits, and one of them decides to instead of just observing, actually attack, which they were not ordered to do. He's taking initiative because he's operating under the assumption, oh well, Char made a name for himself. I'm gonna
Right.
make a name for myself.
He's
so.
kind of a selfish prick, and good
A
thing.
little bit,
And thank God we don't see very much of him.
So they end up starting to attack the colony, which causes a huge panic. The Federation forces are scrambling because they weren't expecting this to happen.
And here we get to just some of the most glorious scenes of ultra-violence you've ever seen.
I would argue that Fist of the North Star has even more graphic depictions.
It's even more it's just people are getting.
These are hard hitting in impact.
There's people getting blown apart left and right, and it's for mid '80s. The movies had to have come out after Fist of the North Star at some point, but for like a mainstream audience in the '80s in Japan, this is sort of eye-opening to a lot of people.
Granted, this show had aired on television first,
right?
So people were already familiar with it.
Yeah, but it was
it was
glorious.
It was glorious. The people died. It was devastating.
Well, I keep the headcanon that they disappeared. They didn't die. They didn't die. No.
Yeah, all throughout the movie, whenever a character wasn't shown to be dying, he just claimed that they would be disappearing.
They're disappearing.
Even though he knew the truth. Even though he knew the truth.
Even though it's hard to accept the truth.
The cold, hard truth
of death.
Yes. So
everyone's in a panic.
This is all chaos. The Federation are kind of scrambling.
Amuro's sort of looking.
He's trying to find his dad because he knows his dad's kind of stuck in the middle of all this.
And he finds his dad,
who tells him to get to one of the shelters.
Yes, but Amuro, being a little scamp that he is, he notices everybody else runs off, and he finds the Gundam.
Yes, the big major mobile suit that the Federation were working on. Like, they had parts for other mobile suits, the gun cannon and the gun tank.
Right.
And those were obliterated,
yes.
Or at least the spare parts were. But Amuro finds the Gundam, and as it turns out, it's actually fully assembled.
Right. It's
just
fully
ready to go.
Fully functional. So
and Amuro just so happens to have the manual for operating it, so...
Right.
So he has to make the quick decision of operating the mobile suit to protect the colony.
In order to save everybody else. Yes, and
and in the process of destroying one of those Zaku's, accidentally ends up blowing a hole in the colony, which results in his dad actually getting sucked out into space.
We'll get to that later at a later time.
He survives.
He survives, but
stuff happens
he's
later on.
Never the same.
Not quite. So Amuro, realizing just how devastating just destroying one of these Zaku's would be for the colony, chooses to more safely defeat the other Zaku that's there.
Right. Yeah. And and he succeeds, but the whole colony is basically has to be abandoned.
Pretty much. The
whole thing has to be abandoned.
So they have to rush the colonists into the Federation warship that's docked at the spaceport.
Right.
The White Base.
Yes, the White Base, otherwise known by the Zeons as the Trojan Horse.
Yes. And that ends up being commanded by a young Federation officer by the name of Bright Noah, because the whole kerfuffle with the Zaku's ended up costing a bunch of Federation soldiers who were supposed to be the crew of the White Base,
and they
end up dying.
And if I remember right, the captain of the ship also gets hurt.
He gets hurt. He survives.
He survives
the attack. But he does eventually end up dying.
Yes.
A little later into the movie. But
right.
But the point is that he basically gives Bright Noah command of the ship because he's probably the only one who can.
And he's a fantastic character, by the way.
Yes, he starts off as a jerk, but as the story goes on, you kind of understand where he's coming from.
He's kind of a jerk ass with a heart of gold.
Yes,
as the trope would say.
And he's kind of out of his depth a bit, but he's doing his best. There's also Ryu Jose, who is a
fantastic pilot, by the way.
Yeah, he was another one of the White Base's crew before most of them got killed off. So he at least has some seniority and can act as a teacher figure to the other characters.
Right, and he stays around for most of the series.
Yeah, he's a great character, which we'll We'll definitely talk about him more later. Trust us.
we're gonna talk about him later.
But so yeah, now we've got a bunch of civilians on this military vessel that up until this point was supposed to remain a secret.
Right.
But the Zeons already got their intel.
Yes, they already know about it. So
Char kind of laments the fact that one guy's stupidity resulted in their attempt to ambush the whole thing.
Right.
It was a colossal failure.
That
was all on that one guy, but Char...
All because he couldn't just, stay down.
He couldn't just stay sitting and just observe the situation. No, he had to try and make a name for himself.
And he sure made a name for himself.
Who was he again?
I don't remember. I don't remember his name.
Oh, yeah.
All I know is he's that one guy who's
that one guy.
He's that one guy who is stupid.
So then this...
who cost the Zeon the war, pretty much.
So this then causes the white base to have to leave port and head towards Luna 2, like this asteroid base,
right?
That's controlled by the Federation. Now, along the way, they end up encountering Char Aznable, which we've already talked about,
yes.
Who at one point actually infiltrates the Side 7 to try and collect data on the damaged mobile suit parts.
Right.
And who ends up being caught by somebody that he thinks he recognizes, which is Sayla. And we'll get into their whole deal later on.
That whole deal is just kind of comes out of nowhere.
But at the same time, you get it. It makes
sense.
It makes complete sense once everything's fully explained.
It's a twist,
and it is even hinted at very early on that there's a connection between the two.
Yeah, it's a twist that's kind of important to the whole plot of the series.
Well, I won't say the whole plot of the series, but it is a major plot element of the series. So they ended up having an encounter. The Gundam shows up to dispose of the spare parts that were lying around before the Federation could get there. So Char isn't able to get all the data that he had gone there to get, but he does manage to get out alive.
Yeah, and that sort of becomes a common theme with him, that he manages to get out of places alive.
Not that he's not skilled or just incredibly lucky. No, this guy is able to survive on his skills, which is definitely shown when we get our first match between the Gundam and Char's Zaku.
Yes.
And Char just shows...
Is that... Yes,
well, he's earned the title of the Red Comet,
right.
And he shows it expertly in the battle against the Gundam.
Yeah, the first match between Amuro and Char, Amuro is completely outclassed in every single way.
He's an amateur. He hasn't done a whole lot of piloting with the whole stuff that was just happening. So he's
just sort of scrambling to survive.
So, yeah, and then... So then when he actually has to face off against an ace pilot like Char, he's kind of lucky to not wind up dead. Because Char completely outclasses him.
And the only reason Amuro actually manages to survive is because the Gundam is so superior to literally all the other Zeon
mobile suits that they had, the Zakus, at that point. I mean... There's stuff revealed that they have some other
gunships that we'll get into.
Mobile suits,
yeah, especially in the third movie.
Yeah, he's looking forward to talking about that.
I'm going to talk about that for a good 20 minutes.
So the White Base, despite facing adversity at the hands of Char and his team, do manage to make it to Luna 2, and are basically given orders to head to Earth to try and reach Jaburo and hook up with the Federation headquarters in South America. Now, along the way, they have yet another encounter with Char, right. And the White Base and the Gundam end up having to go down to Earth through the atmosphere. And as it turns out, the White Base had actually been developed for launch and departure to and from Earth.
Yes.
So it's equipped to actually make re-entry without needing anything special, which is cool. That is cool.
The problem with this situation is they're not in Federation territory.
Yeah, no, they're the skirmish that they have with Char's team in the atmosphere results in them going wildly off course and winding up in North America.
Which I believe was Char's intention, was to throw them off course, if not...
If not eliminate them, then at least throw them into the territory that's controlled by Garma Zabi, the youngest son of Degwin Zabi, the sovereign of Zeon. And
we'll get more into them later.
But definitely we're going to be focusing on Garma at this point, since he's a major figure in this.
Garma's basically the big bad of the first movie.
I wouldn't say that he's the big bad of... I wouldn't really call him a big bad, but he's definitely a...
Well, he's the main antagonist.
The main antagonist for the first movie. But you can kind of understand where he's coming from, since he being the youngest member of the Zabi family,
he has a lot more to prove.
Yes, and not just to his own family, but also to the soldiers that would be serving under him, to prove that he has what it takes to actually be in command, and not just because his father is the sovereign.
Right. So the white base. They're in sovereign territory and they need to hide. So they find a spot to hide, and everybody just sort of goes their own separate.
Now, it should be mentioned at this point that I think the show actually had a couple other skirmishes between the White Base and Garma, and the show and movies actually established that Garma and Char are actually friends.
Yeah, they're good friends.
They're quite good friends. Which will become relevant real soon. Yeah. It's also revealed, kind of late in Garma's story arc, that he has a girlfriend on Earth, Iselina Eiskenbach, who he's honestly completely willing to abandon Zeon for the sake of being with her. And her father, who is a government official on Earth, does not approve of the relationship at all, because... he has alliances with the Federation, so he's opposed to this. But it's actually a really nice humanizing moment for Garma to see that he has this girlfriend that he wants to be with, that he's willing to abandon everything.
And I think that's a positive point about the movies and the series in general. Every character seems real.
Yes. This scene does help to highlight a point. The Zeon, who are ostensibly the bad guy in this story, aren't pure evil. For the most part, the soldiers are really just fighting for the independence of their side.
Yeah, the soldiers are sort of revolutionary. They view themselves as revolutionaries fighting off against the oppressive government of the Federation. And the Federation just sort of sees them as traitors.
Kind of sees them as traitors, kind of seeing them as upstart rebels that they need to quash.
Lest there be other rebels.
And this movie actually does show that the Federation, despite being the good guys in this particular story...
They are not without fault.
They are not without fault whatsoever. They are... Even some of the more lower rank soldiers are very much flawed. Yes. So this show doesn't have... While it does have Zeon are the bad guys, Federation are the good guys, there's a lot of gray area, so it's not just simply black versus white.
Now, it could be argued that the Zeons, though the bad guys, the soldiers aren't, but the ruling family most definitely are.
Oh yeah, they are for the most part corrupt. Garma accepted.
Garma's like the only bright spot in that entire
group. and other stuff that kind of develop his past highlight that.
And a couple of other characters in that ruling family, but for the most part, they're just sort of not.
For the most part, the ruling family are the bad guys.
Yes,
they're
basically manipulating the people when they're doing their will.
Right, and that's
that becomes very poignant.
Later on. Very poignant later on.
Very poignant.
Getting back to Garma, his relationship with Iselina definitely humanizes him as a character.
Yeah.
And so when I guess we got to talk about the scene at the football stadium.
Right. Okay.
So Garma's forces are going in to try and eliminate the White Base, which is in hiding. So they send some of their mobile suits to go search for it. Char actually manages to find the white base.
Yeah.
But instead of revealing to Garma the white base's actual location, he misguides Garma into actually flying past the white base, which gives the white base the opportune moment to actually shoot down his Gao from behind.
Yeah. And it does not end well.
It does not end well for Garma. It ends well for the Federation, but not for Garma. And it's at this point in the movie that it's revealed that Char has actually intentionally backstabbed his friend because of what his family had done.
Yes.
Which we'll get into much more early on when that's actually fully explained.
It's established very clearly in later movies.
Oh yes, it's firmly established here that.
But all we have to guesstimate is Char just backstabbed his friend. How could he do this to him? That's all That's all we have.
Yes.
And
the only person who actually becomes aware of this at this point is Garma, who dies in a blaze of glory trying to suicide crash into the white base and fails to do so.
And blaze of glory, that's going to become a phrase for most of these movies.
Yes. Now, one thing that the movie didn't touch on, probably cutting it out for time, aside from a lot of the side stories that happen in the show, like say, there's this one episode where a group of Zeon soldiers managed to using jetpacks swarm the Gundam and plant time bombs all over it.
Right.
And this actually ends up forcing Amuro to have to very delicately detach all the time bombs by hand. And it gets really tense, and it's a really good episode that's definitely worth checking out.
I'm surprised we didn't get that in the movies.
Well, I would have felt that. I feel that if they had included it, would have just extended the runtime a bit unnecessarily. Okay. There's also the lost episode Kukuru's Doan's Islands, which I have seen, and I can also agree. I can understand why it was removed from non-Japanese releases of the show.
Right.
Because it's a good episode, but it doesn't really contribute a whole lot to the overall story.
So yeah, so he dies in a blaze of glory.
And
it's at this point that Amuro
is starting to develop some powers.
Yes.
Which will get developed a bit later.
He also got angsty in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, but he was a civilian who basically was having to fight all these battles. He was getting so burned out on all of it that he just wanted to just quit. It's like, if you want somebody to pilot, get somebody else. I'm done.
And some people knocked some sense into him.
Great scene.
Great scene.
Great scene, which other shows and animes and other stuff have referenced time and again for good reason. He really grows as a character from.
I make the comparison between Amuro and Shinji Ikari from Neon Genesis Evangelion, because they kind of have similar
backgrounds with regards to
paths in their life. I think the biggest difference between Amuro and Shinji is Amuro accepts his role and finally gets over it.
Amuro chooses to get in the damn robot.
Yes.
There's a whole debate that we could go into, but I don't really want to focus too much on that since we're focusing on Gundam.
Right.
But maybe you'll do some comparison audio or video or something comparing the two.
Just briefly, I like Gundam more than I do Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I don't like Evangelion at all.
I, on the other hand, actually really love Evangelion.
He loves Evangelion, but he understands why I don't like it. But we're not going to get into that.
We're not getting into that.
So while Amuro is developing these powers, who does he run into? His mother.
Oh, yes. And this is actually towards the end of the movie.
Yes.
He ends up encountering his mother, who chose to stay on Earth when Amuro was taken up into space by his father.
And she is basically a coward pacifist.
A bit, yeah. She is not only surprised to see that her son is actually fighting, but there's actually a scene in the movie, and of course the episode that this is taken from, in which Amuro is hiding in a bed, being covered up by a blanket. His mother is there, kind of trying to hide his identity from a couple Zeon soldiers that just happen to be in the area, searching for a Federation officer that they suspect may be nearby.
And she's trying to hide him as best he could, but
the Zeon officers are quite insistent that they check the identity of the person in the bed.
And then a gun goes off, and it's from Amuro.
Amuro shot the Zeon officer to save his own life, and even attempts to
kill the other one.
Kill the other officer that had been there as well.
And his mother just can't believe it.
Yeah, she is like, but what about their families? I could have been murdered, Mom. Do you not care about me? Well, I do, but think about them. It's like,
yeah,
we're at war.
Yeah,
I didn't raise you to be like that.
Get out, basically. Yeah, Amuro's mom basically misses the forest for the trees on this one.
Yeah,
and she's not an appalling character, but she's a character I just hate.
I like her as a character because she actually provides a bit of conflict emotionally for Amuro. Amuro up to this point has just been fighting to survive, and now his mother is decrying his wish to keep on living, basically, or that's what he perceives it as.
Yeah,
and that
in reality
that permanently fractures that relationship.
Yeah, in reality, she just can't believe that her baby boy would do something so horrible as murder.
And from Amuro's perspective, he's just trying to survive in a war.
And he perceives his mom as basically saying, well, you're not as important as they were.
And that
just sort of kills the entire relationship, and he can't stand to look at her anymore. So he leaves. He just leaves her behind.
I should also mention that during all this, we actually get to see some regular Federation soldiers just being complete assholes.
Yeah, they sort of... Some Federation soldiers sort of commandeer an abandoned house.
Which was Amuro's house, where his mom was living. But in these officers' defense, the place had been abandoned before they showed up.
Right.
So it's not like they kicked out the inhabitant; they just found it abandoned. We also get a scene where a couple Federation soldiers are just basically harassing a food cart lady, trying to be like, well, we're protecting this place, so you should give us this food for free.
Yeah.
But she's like, but I need to make money.
Yeah, like we said, the Federation is not without fault.
And this particular moment in this series really kind of highlights it. Probably a bit best for the purposes of this series.
Yeah. Is that no side is actually good.
Right. I mean, we can at least root for the white base crew because
yes,
they're doing their best to not be villains.
Yes, for the most part, none of them are really corrupt at all.
Not on the white base, no.
No.
So they act as a bit of the moral compass for the series, trying to kind of.
And you know, at times they are pressured into doing things that
even then, some of them, like for example Kai, aren't exactly the best role models, which we'll get into.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that in just I think the second movie.
And so yeah, that whole situation with Amuro's mom happens, and
they decide we needed to get out of Dodge.
So white base have to depart. Now, while all this is going on, the Zeon on the Zeon side of thing, they're holding a state funeral for Garma.
Yeah.
In the colony. Who the heck is that?
Oh no.
Hello? Hey, where's your brother?
Tanner?
Yeah.
Okay, hold up. We gotta pause this real quick. We'll be right back. And we're back. Sorry for that delay. Something came up that we weren't actually expecting to happen, but we're back. And now we're going into the state funeral for Garma Zabi.
We're going into the funeral, which is basically the
conclusion of the movie.
Basically.
I think they have a bit of a skirmish with a character named Ramba Rawl at about this point. The white base crew do.
Ramba Rawl, right.
Yes.
He becomes more prominent in the next movie.
Yes, we'll talk more about him. If this, I can't remember if he actually shows up at the end of the third movie, but he definitely does show up at about this point in the show.
Yes.
So it's worth mentioning him here. So yeah, the state funeral, which
Fantastic scene, by the way.
fantastic scene.
Fantastic way to end the movie.
We get a short little clip of Daegwon Zabi listening to a message that Garma had sent him before passing away, and that he feels just broken up about that because it was his youngest, most beloved son.
Okay, so you know how we mentioned earlier that the ruling class is sort of treated as the villains of this movie and how they're sort of corrupt. Daegwon's actually not that bad a guy.
Especially not in this scene.
It's just the rest of his family. It's like there's Giran.
There's the oldest son, Giran, the daughter, sister, Cassilia. I'm saying sister. I mean that she's the sister to the other
she's
members
the
of the
sister.
family.
She's
Not Daegwon's sister. That would be too weird.
She's Giran and everybody else's sister.
And she is cold as ice.
Yes.
And then finally we have Dozelzabi, who is a massive man, and unfortunately the movie version replaces his original voice actor, Daisuke Gori, with somebody else, which is a bit of a shame, but
it is what it is. I still loved the character. He was great.
Oh, yes.
We'll get to him in the third movie.
But yeah, no, we get the scene where Daegwon is just kind of sitting in a room, just listening to this final message from his son, who at the time of recording was completely oblivious what was going to happen to him, and Daegwon is listening to it, knowing what happened to his son.
Yeah.
And Daegwon, in all this, just wanted to have like a nice small funeral, just keep it quiet and private.
He wanted
being a small thing, just be a family thing. But Giran convinced him to have a state funeral, and broadcast it to not only all of Zeon but also to the Federation.
Yeah. So already you can tell the difference in philosophies between Giran and Daegwon. And like I said, Daegwon's actually not that bad a dude. He's the head of state for the Zeon. He's the big rebel, but he actually believes in his cause. He's not actually corrupt, unlike the others.
There's some debate regarding that.
I took it as he's
certainly at this point he's much calmer and a bit, and he definitely becomes a bit more subdued of a character, which is very nice. But this scene helps. This scene where there's this disconnect between Daegwon just wanting to have a quiet funeral and Giran convincing him to have a full-fledged state funeral,
and
really shows the difference.
And we'll get to Giran later. Oh my god!
Now, on the topic of Garma's death, the movie omits what actually happens almost immediately after his death, which is that Isolina, Garma's girlfriend, actually joins up with the remnants of Garma's troops and actually attempts to attack the white base out of revenge for.
That's right. I had completely forgotten about that.
Yeah, that wasn't actually in the movie though. That was in the TV show. So there's actually a really nice point in that particular episode that I want to talk about where after all is said and done, Isolina just on her own faces off against the Gundam with a gun, and Amuro just has no clue who she is. For Isolina, this giant machine just murdered her beloved. But for Amuro, it's just, who is this?
Yeah, it's sort of a huge disconnect between the two.
Yeah, and
it's very poignant.
Very, very poignant, and really helps to firmly establish that Gundam isn't just about the giant robots. It's about the humans. That's actually kind of why we really haven't talked too much about the giant robots. Yeah. Because they're there, and the scenes with them are amazing. For the most part.
It's it's a bit like wrestling. You go in for the fights, then you stay for the characters. But and it's exactly the same with Gundam. You come in for the fights, and then you realize the characters are very good. They're very relatable. They're enjoyable to watch. Some of them, take it a bit too far, but
come for the kind of, at times, over-the-top, but still incredibly enjoyable Gundam fight.
Yes.
Stay for the human drama.
Right.
I think that's actually how I described it when I did my review over on Gamazillong a couple months ago.
Yes, that's right.
So yeah. So then we get anyway, going back to the state funeral, Giran gives this epic speech, basically doing so to empower his forces, and it concludes with him initiating the chant Zig Zion, which everyone in attendance chants right back to him repeatedly, and that's actually where the movie ends with the white base crew, who are actually watching this state funeral on a monitor, witnessing the face of their enemy.
Yeah, it's a God, how would I put it? This is, in terms of quality, because this is a trilogy, the first three. This is definitely a New Hope to Gundam, or to Star Wars.
Yeah, this was the perfect way to end this first movie, by basically showing us that now that the white base and its crew have survived this much, here's a taste of what they have to deal with.
Exactly. And in terms of film quality, like I said, this is in the first three. The first one is definitely A New Hope. The second one is Return of the Jedi, and the third one is The Empire Strikes Back. It's the best of the three.
That's some would debate you on that, but I agree that the third movie in this trilogy is the best. But we'll get into that later.
This is just for comparison's sake.
Right.
So this movie is a great way to be introduced into the Gundam lore.
At least for the original series.
Yes. And it plays all the right notes. It has all the best characters. It has some great action scenes, but not the best in the series. I'd argue the second and the third has a beat, mostly because of magnitude, but based on the character drama of these fights, they are top notch.
Oh yes.
The visuals are spectacular, especially since it was from the original series is from 1979.
Right.
And the only thing I could really compare it to is Tomorrow's Joe from the 60s, which has this gritty, urban, realistic urban,
like
Japanese
it still
feel.
looks cartoony, but the tone is very gritty.
Yeah.
And this was actually something pretty new at the time, because up to this point, giant robot shows were bombastic and over the top and like super robot-y. The robots had superpowers.
Yeah, instead this is more grounded. It's more, yes, they're giant robots, but they're giant killing machines and we should fear them. Instead of look, it's giant robot man.
Oh great, it's Mazinger here to save us. Save us, giant robo.
Or like Jaguar who grows bigger when he fights, and all the people of Japan are like, look, it's Jaguar.
He was only in one movie.
Well, yeah, he was only in one movie, but...
And he was a ripoff of Ultraman.
But even then, it's like, Jaguar, he's a robot that grows in size. We love him, because he saves the day. Instead, this is, holy crap, there's giant robots. We need to get out of here.
Yeah, the giant robots are definitely used as tools and not the focal point.
They are a means to an end.
Right. They are the equivalent of a guy whipping out a really cool looking gun.
Yeah, it's gonna do the same amount of damage. It's flashy and spectacular, and that's why people just can't not look at it. They can't help but stare. Another
great thing about the more real robot aspect, which, by the way, this series basically created that genre of giant robot series. There's actual ammunition. Characters will run out of ammo.
Yeah, Amuro runs out of ammunition at least 3 times in this movie.
Yeah, to kind of drive home the point that no, he's not he's not piloting this super robot that has all these powers.
And he doesn't even use his sword at all in the first movie. Yeah, the Gundam has a sword that.
No, he does use the sword against the first Zaku that he destroys.
He uses it once in the movie, but he doesn't really use it until the third movie.
Yeah, the third movie really kind of shows a bit more of the beam saber.
But but
it cuts out some of the more ridiculous aspects, like the beam javelin and the Gundam hammer.
Yeah, and like. Yeah, those are pretty ridiculous. But for the most part, like in the fight with Char, he runs out of ammo and he doesn't know what to do. So now he's just sort of scrambling for survival against Char.
Yeah.
Who's basically, he's out of ammo. I guess I can go in and kick his ass now.
And Char could have kicked his ass pretty handily if this were any other situation. Yes. But circumstances prevented Char from actually going in for the kill and kind of being forced to retreat. And
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, in a straight one-on-one fight in the first movie, Amuro would have been dead against Char, but Char never had the chance in a one-on-one fight. He was always either 3-on-1, 4-on-1, or like 5 against 2,
I will admit, though, that the show does have a few standard tropes, like the whole introduction of the titular robot as being this amazing, awesome machine that just completely dominates fights, or the introduction of the rival character who's on par, not better.
But even then, the introduction of the mighty Gundam, it's played straight because this is something not even Zeon has ever seen.
Zeon wasn't even expecting it to be a completed robot. They thought it was just parts laying on a truck bed.
Like, it was literally a Black Ops project. It was so top secret, nobody knew about it.
Except for the people who were working on it and those who caught wind of it.
Yes.
And before we move on and take a bit of a break, I do want to talk about some of the other mobile suits that show up. Of course, we mentioned the Zakus.
Yes.
Char's Zaku in particular, we talked a bit about.
The red combat.
They're the iconic ones, and of course, how could we forget talking about the Gundam itself?
Yes, the Gundam is a spectacular looking robot.
Yes, I mean, granted, its color scheme was definitely done to sell toys. Like, if Yoshiyuki Tomino, the series creator, had gotten his way, it would have probably just been, like, all white or something.
Yeah.
Which I think he almost completely does with the Gundam G3, which is in spin-off media, but...
It is what it is,
Yeah. But that's not to discredit the other two Federation mobile suits that are appearing in this movie.
Yes, the gun cannon and the...
gun tank.
And the gun tank, which are... amazing designs, by the way. I love them.
I absolutely love the gun tank's design. Like, if we were to make real giant robots, the gun tank would definitely be what I would imagine would be the earliest type.
Yeah,
you got the tank treads.
It looks like a prototype, but at the same time, it looks so cool because the arms, they're not hands, they are cannons. They're like Gatling...
Small cannons.
They're Gatling gun
They're
cannons.
Literal handguns.
Yeah, it's a Gatling gun cannon.
And then you've got the huge tank cannons on the shoulders.
And there's artillery cannons attached to the back. And it's amazing. Who pilots that one again?
Hayato.
Hayato pilots it, and he's actually great in it.
Yeah, I don't think the movie really firmly establishes it, but in the show, originally the gun tank actually required 2 pilots. One in the main torso cockpit, and then one in the head.
Yeah, that's how talented Hayato is. He can manage that thing by himself.
Well, eventually they do make that change to grant that ability, but like early on, that's just how skilled. Yeah, that's how skilled he becomes. And then we have the gun cannon, which
is sort of the same build as the Gundam.
It looks a bit more armored and more rounded.
Yes.
But
and it's all red too. It's not
except for the head.
Except for the head,
which is white.
Yes.
And it's got these cannons on its shoulders, and
it looks like an infantry mobile suit. Like it looks like a standardized what would be mass-produced mobile suit.
Which is ironic since it actually isn't a mass-produced
No,
model.
it isn't a mass-produced model. It just looks that way.
We'll get to the mass-produced models
Yes.
later, but I also do really... just in general, I love the 3 Federation mobile suit designs from the beginning.
Who was it that pilots that one?
Kai.
Kai, yes.
The jerk.
The jerk. And that fits his character so well, because it's kind of a rough design, it's rough around the edges. It doesn't look perfect.
Yeah, I would.
It looks like it has a few flaws, and that sort of fits Kai's character.
Right. I feel that each of the mobile suits represents a different style of combat. You got the gun tank, which is obviously for long range combat.
It's for sniper fights and for keeping cover for your friends.
Suppressing fire and all that. Then you've got the gun cannon, which is definitely for a bit of mid to long range.
It serves more as the.
Its strengths are definitely more in its firepower and range of attack.
And it's not very maneuverable. It's not like the gun cannon is not very maneuverable.
The gun tank has tank treads, and the gun cannon does look quite a bit bulkier than the Gundam.
And the Gundam is for straight up fist fights.
It's for a mid to close range combat. Like, it's actually got the equipment capable of actually doing close range combat with its beam sabers.
Yeah.
And its shield.
It's
got some long range abilities like its beam cannon and its bazooka. But then you also got some of the ridiculous stuff like the beam javelin, which looks kind of cool, but is really okay. So that, and then the Gundam hammer, which doesn't even get used in the movies because it's basically just a flail. It's basically just a rocket propelled flail on a chain. It's ridiculous.
The gun and the swords. Those ones are just grade A. They are spectacular weapons.
Those are the kind of weaponry that get brought over to other shows.
Yes.
In the franchise,
as we can see, with some of your other
other
Gundams, the blade is definitely prominent.
For the record, if anybody has watched my ProtoMet Tries videos, we're talking about the Gundams that appear in the very background on my set, on those like black shells like up at the top of the screen, and
they are good looking.
Oh yes. And actually, these model kits, not these ones specifically, but the fact that model kits came out at around the time that these movies came out, were also part of the reason why the series regained popularity following its original.
Yes, the original series was actually canceled.
Yes, it was originally supposed to run for like 52 episodes, I think, but
it got shortened to 36.
It got shortened to 39 episodes because of poor toy sales, but
as soon as those, and they managed to leverage for.
Yeah, they managed to negotiate to have a month extension, so
it was like 42.
43 episodes.
Right.
42 here in the States that I recovered the lost episode.
And yes, the fact that it was shortened to 42 episodes only is definitely prominent in the third movie, which I will get into a lot.
We will certainly get into it. But for what the first movie has, and its compression of the first 13 or so episodes, it does a fantastic job of establishing the characters and the plot, and doing so in such a way that doesn't let you feel like you're missing out on too much.
And this movie is what? 2 hours about?
2 hours, 20 minutes, I think, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, about 2.5 hours.
It's a bit longer, but considering that it's condensing 13 episodes, that's actually a pretty fantastic compression.
Yeah, and it's a very nice, it's a very brisk 2.5 hours. It goes. There are parts that sort of drag, like them trying to hide from everybody, and at the scenes where they're just sort of walking around and talking to strangers.
There are definitely moments where things are a bit slow, but I feel that those actually help to establish the characters.
And we also forgot the comedy spots with the kids.
Oh yes, the little children, which
There are kids on the ship.
there are kids on the ship. What show would be complete without child characters?
And they're not actually that annoying.
They're not, no.
They're not annoying because they show up only a moderate amount of times.
Yeah,
And they don't really disrupt the plot at all.
No,
in fact, they kind of become important to the plot.
Oh yes, they definitely fill a space in the cast and crew.
Yes.
So they actually feel pretty welcome. It's a bit odd early on, but they definitely grow on you.
They pretty much serve to lighten the mood at times when stuff gets pretty dark.
Yeah, it gets pretty grim at times, but it is a war, and this was a somewhat accurate rendition of the.
I don't know
war.
about you, but I genuinely like the kids.
Oh,
in this movie.
definitely.
They are
Definitely.
They are good characters. They
Oh,
don't have
agreed.
any. They have like little character growth at all, but they are such a welcome addition.
Yes, I agree. I'm pausing because I've actually seen Zeta Gundam, and and I'm just remembering. I'm just remembering a bit involving.
Do they grow up?
They do grow up, and
Yes.
we'll get to that when we get there. But I was actually more remembering the kid characters from that show. They're a little less well implemented.
Less
personally.
endearing.
Granted, I haven't actually finished watching Zeta Gundam, so maybe they grow on me. But from where I'm at right now, they're just kind of there for some reason, and
Yeah.
but we're not talking about Zeta Gundam. We're talking about
The first movie.
the first movie. Yes.
Which, if I would have to rate it, I'd probably rate it maybe a solid 7.5 out of 10. It does drag at times, and it's not nearly as good as the other two films, but it's a solid introduction to the series and to the other two movies. Has some very good fight scenes, great characters, some great set pieces.
I'm a little disappointed that the Blu-ray doesn't have an English dub, but I can forgive it because
That's
fine. I mean,
that Japanese dub it's actually very good.
yes, it is well done. And honestly, I probably would have watched it with the subtitles on anyway.
Yeah.
That's more my preference. I'm just saying that there's no dub. They didn't record a dub for it for some reason.
It was just sort of
So if you've watched the English dub of Mobile Suit Gundam, you're not going to hear any of the familiar voice actors in there. On the topic of voice actors, in the English dub, Amuro is voiced by Brad Swale, who you might recognize as also being the voice of Light Yagami from the Death Note anime.
okay.
But when I was first watching the dub more recently, with actually knowing who the heck Brad Swale was, whenever I heard his voice, I actually was reminded heavily of another character that he voiced, and that was Kicker from Transformers Energon.
Oh boy, we're gonna get into a Transformers debate. I'll let you take the floor on this one.
I'm not gonna go into full detail, but initially how Amuro was portrayed did remind me a lot about Kicker, who is not the best character in Transformers.
Was he portrayed any differently in the English dub than the Japanese sub?
I feel that the English dub actually does a pretty good... are we talking Kicker or Amuro?
Amuro.
Amuro, I don't feel, is handled very much differently in the English dub compared to the Japanese.
For the record, I've only seen the English sub. I haven't seen the dub.
Right. Like, his introduction to this...
Literally,
to this show was
literally like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and
what an introduction, right?
I finally got him to sit down and watch it.
My initial reaction was amazing to the fact that Sydney, Australia, got completely wiped out by a colony.
And that's how the show starts.
That's how the show starts. I was just, here we go. This is gonna be fun.
But anyway, going back to the topic of Brad Swale, in Transformers Energon, his character sucks. Like, super hard. He is a whiny brat of a character. Despite being in his teenage years, he's...
Sounds like somebody else I know. Shinji.
And Kicker is like the opposite of Shinji in terms of personality. Like Kicker will just rush headlong into the situation when really he shouldn't, because they're giant sentient robots shooting at each other.
So like,
it's not like Kicker's piloting anything. He's like wearing a bit of light armor.
So it's like Asuka.
Yeah, it's actually more like Asuka.
Yikes.
He's very whiny. He's very frustrating as a character.
But Amuro is a better character.
And it really helps that Amuro is actually a well-written character.
Yes, the writers of the Gundam series took amazing care with the characters.
For the record, I have also watched the original Japanese version of Energon, and Kicker's just as bad in that. So,
yikes.
So it's definitely not Brad Swale's fault that Kicker is.
It's just a bad character.
But I'm just bringing that up and to act as a comparison to Amuro, who is a much better character.
And I don't think there's really any bad characters. There's just unlikable characters, like Amuro's mom, for example. I don't like her as a character because she basically sells out her son for pacifism.
Right.
Which is just awful.
I like her in that role. I still feel that she's not that likable as a person, but as a character, I really appreciate it.
Because she basically sells out her son to keep her own pacifist morals, which is just sort of awful. It's a bit like the Thals in Doctor Who in the original Dalek storyline. They're so pacifistic, they're willing to just lay down and die.
Pacifistic to a fault.
Yeah, and that's Amuro's mother in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So with that said, that is the first Gundam movie.
We're gonna take a break here. We're gonna come back and talk about Mobile Suit Gundam 2: Soldiers of Sorrow. So until then, enjoy this break. I think I might actually just end this particular recording here and maybe work on uploading it. Yep. We'll record something else and release that as separately.
Yeah, no problem.
So
that's how it works, and this was Mobile Suit Gundam 1.
Because this is going out. This is over an hour at this point.
Yeah.
So
this is my recycled balls.
This is me, ProtoMet. See ya.
Have a good one.